My friends, good day. I'm going to explain to you what's happening with the farmers in France and put this in a historical context, but also in a broader context. I'm going to start by quickly making a little drawing. So here, initially, I have this drawing where you have the suppliers in black. So we have a lot of suppliers who provide tractors, fertilizer, seeds, basically everything the farmer uses. In the middle, you have the farmers, and on the right, you have the customers, meaning those who will consume what the farmer produces. This economic vision is one that has been undermined by changes in the economic model. That means that at first, if you look at my drawing, you get the impression that, for example, if the farmer wants to buy a tractor, he has a lot of choices. There is competition between tractor suppliers, the same between fertilizer suppliers or seed suppliers. And that he can actually, given this competition between them, he can get supplies where conditions and prices are better. You also get the impression that there are a lot of customers fighting to give the farmer the best price for his products. That's it. That vision might still be valid to some extent in the tech market or in other markets, but it's no longer valid for farmers. I'll explain why I'm changing my drawing. You'll understand soon. If you look here at what's happening with the suppliers, we're going to reduce the number of suppliers. Why? Because in a capitalist economy, what happens is that competition leads to monopoly and monopoly leads to competition. In fact, that's what's happening. We have competition, but what's the purpose of competition? It's to crush the competitor, to push them to ruin, to push them to bankruptcy. Ideally, buy them for almost nothing by acquiring their intellectual property, licenses, and client lists. So what we see is that there's consolidation, which means that the big ones are buying the small ones more and more. And in reality, when the farmer wants to get supplies for anything, he will find himself facing them. Probably one or two companies that have, in fact, a monopoly and will impose their prices. He doesn't have a choice. There's no competition among suppliers when the farmer wants to sell his products. Well, what does he have? He also has the same problem. If you look, there aren't many customers. In fact, there are what we call purchasing centers, and these purchasing centers also set the price. That means the farmer can't negotiate or set prices for potatoes or wheat. He has no bargaining power. It's a platform that's most often digitalized. There's a website. He logs in, he connects. By offering, you accept. That's the price we're offering today for that. Either you take it, or if you don't take it, you keep the product and go home. So in reality, you see that the farmer himself is divided, but he's facing monopolistic groups. So what could happen is that we can imagine, for example, a situation where the farmers develop a counteroffensive or a collective defense. That means farmers can do that too. In fact, it's illegal because there are several French and European laws that forbid farmers from defending themselves collectively. That means that, for example, imagine if the farmer invents the organization of the petroleum exporting countries of farmers. If the farmer does a bit like the oil-producing countries, and then decides that, well, let's sit together as part of a union, and then we'll decide that next year we'll reduce production, not sell below a certain price, just like Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries does. Well, that's called collusion, and it's illegal, and they'll end up with the government on their backs. The farmers can't defend themselves collectively against this kind of attack, so here's what's going to happen. Gradually, the farmers will start going bankrupt. Okay, the farmers will start shutting down, so there will be fewer and fewer of them. What the state will do is the state will say to itself, since there's a problem with the farmers, and that's all we're going to do, we're going to inject subsidies, okay? So we'll come in with a system of French or European or other subsidies. The problem with these subsidies is that they have to reach those people, and those people, what they get. You can see that it's a pincer. You can see that we're in a pincer. It's like a tool crushing farmers from both sides. Everyone knows they've received subsidies and wants something from them. I'm just giving you an example. When I was living in France, I had a studio, and this studio was normally eligible for aide personnalisée au logement. I never received them since I couldn't get a residence permit in France and left. Still, I'm telling you the story. One day, the government decides to increase the aide personnalisée au logement by 50 euros for this kind of studio. What happens? Within a month, I get a letter from the landlord saying, because the government raised the aide personnalisée au logement by 50 euros, your rent will also go up by 50 euros. That means he considers that this housing assistance, well, it should have gone entirely to him. And it's the same thing. They do the same thing with subsidies in many countries around the world. Subsidies are systematically accompanied by price controls. That means subsidies, you can say good or bad things about subsidies. That's not the purpose of the video. But what if we introduce a subsidy without controlling the negative side effects it will create? Well, quite simply, we're just throwing money out the window. So what happens is the suppliers and the customers know. For example, let's say this farmer is earning 1,000 euros. It's the same as that. Okay, that's his work, his job. With subsidies, potato prices and subsidies both increase. What you want is 1,000 euros per hectare that he is earning. Well, what they're going to do is raise the prices. They can do it because simply those guys, the suppliers, raise the prices. The customers lower the prices. Those ones to increase their margins, and those ones too, right? They raise the prices until the farmer ends up with 10 euros per hectare. You see what I mean? Because they say to themselves, well, how much does he have in his hand? Because they're able to analyze that. They have all the data, so they analyze, they're earning 1,000 euros per hectare. So what can we do? We can push and adjust our prices. Raise on one side, lower on the other. And like that, he'll end up spending the following year 990 euros more per hectare, so that's money he'll give us. These are exactly algorithmic optimization systems that are being used more and more today, which don't leave you with any value. And by the way, I'm being nice here because often they increase it even beyond the break-even point. What happens then? The farmer will end up in deficit. He realizes he's not earning 1,000 or even 10 euros per hectare, but actually losing 500 euros per hectare. So how does the farmer respond? And this response is historical. By the way, this system of predation or capitalistic extraction automatically generates overwork. What will the surviving farmers do? They'll say to themselves, for us, the only way to survive, the only way to try to win, still, our meager share in this system is to work more. So they'll sacrifice their vacations, work endless hours, work on weekends, and so on, to try to improve their situation a little bit, except that it's a race with no way out. Why? Since those suppliers and clients know they're overworking, what will they do? Well, they're also going to put pressure on him to take all the value he's created with the extra work. And that's why farmers often find themselves in situations of psychological distress, in situations of exhaustion, of burnouts, because quite simply, they're up against a system. They're playing an unfair game. You see, they're crushed from all sides. So what happens next? Here we have the introduction of another system that will allow us to go further in our reasoning. For example, we have agreements with Mercosur, okay? So what will these Mercosur agreements do? They will serve the interests of oligarchic systems because it allows them to come and sell their system. Their model, because it's a model. They're not just selling tractors or seeds, but an entire operational model. For example, consider when you have the tractor. I talk about it, by the way. I talk about it in these two books. Escrology is now available in audio format for those who prefer listening to books over reading them on paper. And the Great Betrayals too. I'm talking about the common agricultural policy, the common fisheries policy, and how these systems are made. These are systems. It's not like, for example, the tractor that you can't repair because, quite simply, it's forbidden. There are devices that will block the repair of the tractor. And then, when the tractor breaks down the day before a harvest, you're ready to pay anything so that the one who sold it to you, in reality, they didn't sell it to you. You don't actually own it. And they gave you a license to use the tractor. And when the tractor breaks down, you have to call them. They have to come with an electronic case because inside there's a computer system that blocks the repair. I'm telling you, it's a real system. So the supplier's system gives them access to a new market. The buyers, the purchasing centers are very happy to come and buy here. And so putting the surviving farmers in competition with those from Mercosur. So what will happen is that more and more sales will start to drop, and then we'll move on to another system. For example, as we've seen with the Labour Party in the United Kingdom, a left-wing party on paper. Well, what they did is they decided to introduce a tax. They decided to introduce an inheritance tax. Okay, on inheritance. So what happens is that at that moment, when the old patriarch of the farm dies, when the grandfather dies, well, what's going to happen is that the state will come in and tell the surviving children, well, now you're going to have to give us money. Your farm is worth this much. So the problem is that we also get to these people who are wealthy in assets. There are people who are quote unquote rich, but it's a wealth of assets. For example, an old couple might have lived for 40 years in a small house on the Ile de Ré, the French Riviera, or elsewhere. Suddenly, a real estate boom raises their house's value, but their standard of living stays the same. Only their walls are worth more. They've always lived there, but their house's market value increases. Eventually, what can happen is they might be asked to pay a wealth tax, or they might be charged extremely high local taxes. If they die, their children can't keep the property. They'll have to sell it to the wealthy, since only the rich can afford that obligation. Forced. What's going to happen is you'll see it's always a system extracting from the bottom to the top, all right? Always the most. The one at the bottom of the food chain is forced to give up what he has and offer it higher and higher up. There is an accumulation of capital, an accumulation of goods, an accumulation of money, wealth, and means of production. And that reminds us of what I said at the beginning of the video, monopoly. Where does monopoly come from? Monopoly comes from accumulation, if you will. So we have accumulation from the bottom to the top, and accumulation can only go from the bottom to the top, quite simply because we have a pyramidal system. You see, we have a pyramidal system with, if you look at the bottom, trillionaires aren't at the bottom, they're at the top. There are the masses, then millionaires, billionaires, and finally, trillionaires. All right. So what's going to happen is that inevitably accumulation will always go from the largest number to the smallest number. All right, so let's go. More and more, a large number of people have to sacrifice themselves to allow an ultra minority to accumulate. And actually, quite simply, with the essentials that we give up, we're going to finance their trivialities. You see what I mean? And actually, we're in these situations today. If you look at humanity's history, never losing sight of history with a capital H, this is the situation we face. The more they grow, the more we collectively will grow in number, the more they will grow in what? In wealth. Obviously, if you look today, is humanity from its history? I'm asking you the question, is humanity from its history? Has it ever been this numerous on Earth? The answer is no. We are at the highest numbers ever in humanity. Has humanity ever had as many billionaires and trillionaires in its history? The answer is no. You see, so you can clearly see that there is one. There is a simultaneity, but what I'm telling you is that beyond the simultaneity of the two events, there is a correlation between the two events. I can even predict that when humanity has doubled, well, what's going to happen is that the number of these people who are all at the top of the pyramid won't necessarily double as well, but it's their wealth that will increase, because that's how the whole system is built. Now, what I was telling you is that in the United Kingdom, what we've done is we've created an inheritance tax, so that when the old man dies, well, what will happen is these children who are wealthy heirs won't be able to keep the farm. They have to sell it to pay the inheritance taxes. They don't have enough money left to buy another farm, or at best they can sell half the farm and keep the rest, but at the next death it will be split in half again, and then again after 2 or 3 deaths it's over. There's nothing left, only crumbs remain. So who is buying these farms? Who is currently buying them in the United Kingdom? In the United Kingdom, international capitalist groups are buying them. That means what's going to happen is that the farm that fails doesn't just fail for everyone. In reality, it will end up being bought by large capitalist groups. So the large capitalist group doesn't buy it with a farmer's logic. They don't buy it to plant beets. They buy it with a financial logic. So it's financial grabbing. They will come in, buy the farms that almost went bankrupt, put them in their portfolio, and do what with them? So what will they do with them? They can use them to speculate. They can sell them later when the price has gone up, but generally, that's not really what they're doing today. Well, what he's going to do, he's going to take the farm, he's going to leave it fallow, Okay. And so once he leaves the farm fallow, he's going to get something from that, from the area he left fallow. He's going to get carbon credits, you see, so he'll get carbon credits. That's more. Today, it's normal. We transform the farm, we transform each square meter of the farm, we turn it into a sale. The more square meters you have, the more you'll declare, and leaving it fallow is ideal. Today, the West is filled with words of death. That's what our actions represent. We crush the one who produces, we crush the one who feeds us, who feeds the nation. And to finance the one who will seize the land, he leaves it fallow. Empires have fallen for far less than that. You can see that this isn't a sustainable situation. It's not something that's meant to last. So the whole story about carbon also helps create an ideology, because you have to know that the forces of money always find a way. With ideologues, you notice they're useful ideals. They're the ones discussing big moral principles. He doesn't realize he's just defending the money-driven business model, plain and simple. So you'll find horizontal struggles when, for example, people from big cities. You can have hipsters from big cities. And then the day he goes to work by bike, he feels like he's saved the planet. And that person thinks that farmers are big polluters. And then they need to be taxed, and then they need to be shut down. And then they should leave their land fallow, like they do, for example. They did that in the Netherlands. Remember a couple of years ago when the Dutch government had that major conflict with farmers blocking roads? But in the end, they were broken. Afterwards, they each told the administration they'd sell their land for almost nothing, leaving the land fallow, taken over by powerful capitalist groups who buy it with a financial logic to create profit from the land. In fact, the land will become a vacuum. The fallow land will become a vacuum. Taxpayer money, that means the money, the tax money you see here. The money that is captured, for example, through inheritance, will go here, will be injected into this one. So we take a tax from the one who wants to work the land, and we're going to offer it. We're going to offer it for shareholders, for dividends, for bonuses, from the one who takes over the land and is going to leave it fallow. I'm telling you, my friends, this system is a recipe for collapse. So what we're seeing as well, allow the African woman that I am to maybe give you another perspective, maybe another African vision. Maybe not everyone will agree with what I'm about to tell you, but think about it. I believe there's a lot of truth in what I'm going to say now. In fact, if you look, these predatory systems exist because they are systems. You realize that we find them on farms and that we can find them in other sectors, in other parts of the economy. They do what we call extractive economics. That means when I talk to you about extractive economics, I'm telling you that the parasite decides to kill the victim, to kill the other. He will go there, extract everything, and when he has taken everything, he will go somewhere else to do something else. The thing is, at one time, there were imperial and colonial possessions. It means that these same capitalist groups, backed by public force, so backed by the state and the army, would go somewhere in a country, land among a people thousands of miles away, arrive with an act of expropriation, and then take the land by force. You see, so it happened, and it's provable. It happened on a very large scale afterwards. Later on, these people who were expropriated in this way eventually managed to reclaim their lands. There was, at a certain point, a historical shift where the old empires, the former colonies, were driven out, and driven out along with them. The capitalist group that was there for exploitation, so everyone was kicked out, and the lands were nationalized. Actually, I'll tell you something. Once you have a capitalist group that buys the land, do you know what the solution is? There is no other solution than nationalization. You can't do otherwise. If you look at history, it always ends up with nationalization. Because quite simply, it's big groups that are going to take over, and they don't have any. The group is eternal, the company is eternal, people die, but the company is eternal. So for them, they will never pay inheritance tax. You see what I mean? When the chief executive officer changes or the chief executive officer dies, there are others who replace him, so the group is eternal. The lands are placed in portfolios, are located in tax havens, etc. You can't even touch them. So the only way to break up this system would be through nationalization. That means by force, literally. It's mine, I take it. Now, the state takes it back, returns it to the people, takes everything from you and compensates you. It's that simple. And if you want, just come then. What happened is that once the empire collapsed, you look at the British Empire in the 1980s, the 1950s, the years, it covered 25% of the entire world. They once called the British Empire the empire on which the sun never set. Now it's the empire where the sun never rises. Isn't it the same? You look at France, you even look at small countries like Belgium, Portugal, you look at Portugal, they still had Brazil, you know what I mean? But what happened is that these capitalist groups are really the cancer of these countries. Once they were forced to return to their country of origin, what did they do? They reverted to the same colonization and extraction methods. That means that today I can defend the idea that the Breton peasant is an internal colonized person. He is colonized not by foreign forces, as has happened to many peoples throughout their history, and it's written in their memory. He is colonized by internal forces using the same mechanisms and actors. That means you have the state that forbids him from defending himself. It's like when you have Algerian peasants or people in Senegal or people in Cameroon or elsewhere. Then we come and tell them, now here's the guy, he's the boss, it belongs to him, now he's the one in charge. If you even move, they'll handle you. It's the same thing. You can clearly see that it's the state organizing all this, and it's the state that protects the extractors. So for me, the Breton farmers are colonized people, internal colonized people, facing the same forces. That's it. But now it's happening internally. If we redirect, if we direct this colonial perversity, this perversity of extraction inward. So there you go, my friends. What's the risk? The risk with this, right? Well, the risk is a collapse of the food chain. It's skyrocketing prices in supermarkets. Goods might not reach there as they use the same extraction logic on you as with farmers. So they know how much money remains. Well, if they have 100 euros left at the end of the month from their salary, well, then we'll just raise the price of food like that. We take the 100 euros. You see, they're in deficit, they're overdrawn. How much is their overdraft limit? 500 euros. Well, we'll push them to 500 euros. Their overdraft is 200, but if the bank allows 500 euros, why not use an algorithm to push it to the limit? You get my point. There's no need to ask, what is their borrowing capacity? I'm already thinking like an extractor. Well, they're in debt on average by 15,000 euros, but what is it? How far can they go? They can actually go up to 20,000. Well, let's push them to go to 20,000. That way we take the 5,000. He has no limits with extraction. He'll keep going until he destroys you and brings you to your knees. It's the worst form of brutality. In fact, these extraction economies have been described by renowned economists as brutality. Just to tell you, so there you go, my friends. We can always have small struggles, like sometimes farmers rebel and take to the streets, things like that. But it's an uneven fight. You see what I mean? They go out, but you know that, well, pretty quickly they'll get tired because he drags it out. Those are global forces. They never tire. It's the clay pot versus the iron pot. All right, thank you, my friends, for watching until now. I'll show you my 2 books once again. See Ecology. This shows how ecology is used as an ideology. So it's not real ecology. It's ecology that's used to extort people, to organize large-scale scams. So many of those mentioned here have been convicted in court, but while some are being convicted in court, others are still working. And here, these are the big traitors. It's the systematic destruction for financial reasons, ideological reasons, and others. In any case, I hope that was clear. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask them, and I'll see you in the next video. See you very soon.